Hello, everybody. Well, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Bart with the Cadence team, and we are thrilled to have you joining us today for another one of our webinars. It's good to see, I say this a lot, and I mean it. As I look through the attendee list, it's good to see so many familiar faces joining us again. We are really excited to dive into today's webinar. And me personally, selfishly, Jaden from our team just posted in the chat, I'd love for you to join me on LinkedIn. I've mentioned this a little bit in our last few webinars, but I use my LinkedIn to talk a lot about what we're doing as a company, announcements, events, etc. We also have been more and more sharing some of the things that we use to run our company. And we've had wonderful responses and wonderful feedback there, and we'll continue to do that. So you'll see in the chat my LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you there. So, and again, thank you for joining us. For those that don't know who we are, Cadence, we are software for compliance and marketing professionals at financial institutions. Yes, I just actually read that. I know that's kind of boring to read it, but I did. We focus on everything from end-to-end CRA management, feedback, complaint management. Today, we're going to talk a lot about AI and marketing and AI. And at Cadence, we are ready to launch Humda. So if you didn't know we do Humda, that is our next thing coming out very, very soon, and Fair Lending right behind that. So for those that are looking for more solutions for that, we're happy to dive into that with you. We are a month away from our user conference. We have a whole bunch of customers coming. I know many of you on this call will be joining us there. We just love our user conference. We love spending time with you, our customers. We love spending time with so many of you. We appreciate you being willing to come to Utah. So the link is there for those that are last minute registrants. You've got a few weeks left. We'd love to have you join us. One of the last things I'll mention, and we'll post this in the chat as well. Some of you probably saw this on LinkedIn. This is our fifth year doing our contest, and we love it. So, our marketing team, we do a $500 donation to a financial education program of your choice. And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize here is we don't just put the applicants in a hat and draw them out randomly. Our team reads them. So our marketing team takes the initial pass, vets them all. So sell it, put in a good story, sell it to us, and then our entire company does a vote on which one we think is making the most impact. And we have a few other criteria things we look at. So we welcome your submissions there, and that's a fun thing for us to do. Similar to other webinars, we are going to stick around today and do a brief demo. We'll separate this. This is not part of the CE credit, but for anybody who wants to stick around after today's webinar from our awesome presenters and learn more about how Cadence can help with AI and compliance and marketing, Brandon from our team will stick around. We'll talk about that at the end. Today's webinar, 1.25 ABACE credits, very similar process as always. Watch the webinar, fill out the form, we'll get you the credits. If you have any questions, you can always email our team. Occasionally, maybe you're missing some credits or you've done a handful of webinars and you need a bunch of certificates, no problem. Send that information over to us. Ask any questions you have, and we're happy to help. As always, we love our guys for the Bank Marketing Show, but what they say is they're on their own. We take no responsibility for what they say. It's probably going to be really good, and I'm super excited for it because with the tools they're going to show and the way they get into it is very much how we love to operate our company and a few things. So I think you'll quite enjoy today's overview. So with that in mind, Chris, Dan, feel free to join me. That's their cue to join me on camera. I made them be off camera all until now. Chris, Dan, thank you for being here. Before you jump in, what I want to do is just mention to all of our listeners today, and we've got a wonderful turnout today. We first found you guys through LinkedIn, I believe. I forget the source, but we learned of the Bank Marketing Show, which is a podcast that happens every other Monday. And you guys invited Charles, our Director of Compliance Operations, to be on your show. And Chris, I'm going to put your words, not mine. Chris let me know that Charles basically broke the internet. They had such a good response that day, and so we were
Yep.
thrilled to be part of that. But Chris, if you don't mind, before we jump into our topic today, the Bank Marketing Show. For all of our listeners today, why should they care? Give us a quick pitch on what is that and what are you doing with it?
Well, they should care because it's about us pouring resources into people in the industry, is the short version there, Bart. But what Dan and I did when we met at a marketing agency CEO conference many years ago is we both had in mind to start a podcast and work in bank marketing. We started that knowing that it was a really small niche area. And frankly, after more than 4 years and 108 episodes and growing, we have been pleasantly surprised. And so it's just a great resource. We hear from lots of people. We've had people that are state banking association CEOs down to compliance people like Charles and Rebecca Romero Rainey from CEO of ICDA, and all kinds of people on the show with us, providing resources to people in the industry. It's actually turned out to be a lot of fun, Bart. So we invite people to join and subscribe and, pass it on to your team in ways that can be helpful.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Chris. We in the chat there, I point to it like you guys know what I'm pointing to. My
Yeah.
chat's over there. In the chat, Jaden posted the link to the Bank Marketing Show. One of the, if I may, one of the reasons why maybe we as a company have resonated so well with what Chris and Dan are doing on the Bank Marketing Show is very similar to what we're doing today with these webinars. Yes, at Cadence, we sell software. Chris and Dan, they have their own marketing agencies. We believe that part of what we do is how can we give back and how can we be maybe a more integral part of the community that we're in. We don't want to just be a vendor on the side that provides software. We want to help and engage and be part of what you're doing, which is exactly the purpose of the Bank Marketing Show. So we a lot of synergy here on how each of us are doing these things. So yeah, we encourage everybody subscribe to the Bank Marketing Show. Phenomenal tool. We were happy to be part of it as well. So okay, that's enough for me. Dan, Chris, I'm gonna go off camera. Uh, the floor is yours. Let's dive in.
All right. Well,
Thanks a
let
lot,
me
Bart.
get this going. Welcome again, everybody. Thanks, Bart, for the great introduction. So, y'all know we're talking about how to grow your bank in the modern age with the proliferation of AI tools today. So, excited to see this many people on. Should be a great session, and excited to have you here. So, I'll jump in. So, we've all seen the headlines. These are all pretty recent, but over the last couple of years since the launch of ChatGPT, there's just the sky is falling, right? 65% of marketing jobs may not survive AI. 92 million jobs expected to be displaced by 2030. Um, we wanted to start here to talk about this and what it might mean for banks, bank marketing, and in particular, because that's what we're focused on. But I know we probably got a lot bigger audience than just bank marketers here too. So I think the lesson here is right, like AI is changing a lot of stuff, but we don't think it's going to be quite as bad or happen quite as quickly as these headlines written to get you to click on them kind of make it sound. The world is going to be upended by this stuff, but we want to talk kind of practically today about how we think that's going to happen and what to do about it today and where to think about it going in the future. So, that's kind of our thing. AI isn't going to replace all bank marketers. It's not going to replace, banks are not going to become kind of fully autonomous AI bots anytime soon. Man, look out 100 years in the future, who knows? But, I think our jobs are safe for a while if you start using AI the right way. It's going to make you capable of doing more, right? We're already all, using ChatGPT and Claude and other tools a lot more than we were a year or two ago. The promise is there. The promise is there to help us do more, help smaller banks act bigger, help bigger banks do more with smaller teams. If you use it the right way. So how we like to think about it is that you have an opportunity to lead the way now, right? Don't don't ignore this opportunity that's coming, and we're hoping in our talk today that we're helping giving you some tools to think about how to do that and things you can be doing today. So Chris,
Yeah, if any of you were around and in the industry back in the early 20 teens, you remember that social media was the wild, wild west. It was crazy. And at that point around 2013, some banks were jumping into that and looking at it as opportunistic. Others wanted to sit on the bench and watch what happened and all of that. And lo and behold, FFIAC guidelines were introduced in 2013 and gave us the borders and the parameters with which to operate as banks and as bank marketers in social media. We feel like that's where we are today. this is the wild, wild west. We don't know exactly what AI is going to look like down the road. We've got some prognostication that we'll give you a bit about today and kind of look into that view a little bit. But what we're concerned about today is the encouragement to you to start small, to look at the opportunities to learn fast. It's amazing. I was giving a workshop series to a group of about 18 different banks and bank marketers earlier this week, and everybody's all over the map. Some banks are using this and are headlong into it and looking at workflow processes and marketing and how they can use it. And some are quite a bit more reserved than that. So while realizing that, Dan, to echo what you were saying, we feel like this is for community banks in particular. This is perhaps some of the most competitive opportunity that we've seen in a long time, and lots of different ways to approach that. You're going to figure out what it is that fits best for you. But we feel like we're on the cusp of that and want to help everyone get on the front of the wave with that. Yeah. So here's what we're going to cover today. We segmented this for you a bit into past, present, future, if you will. So we want to look and kind of analyze a bit to set the stage of what AI has already done, looking at the realities that we sit in today and kind of the effects that we see that it's having on your career and your bank. And then segue into that, we're actually going to do some demo for you and give you some specific tools and directions and look at kind of how we think that it's evolving your job description and what that means, and give you a good recipe for prompting as well. So you'll want to make note of that, and then look at where it's going, where we see this in the very near future. We all know that AI is moving things extremely fast. So when we're talking about near term, we're not way out a year or two. We're talking near term in a matter of months. And then a little bit further out, and then what we see like is a bit prognosticated into the further future for how it's going to impact us all. Yeah, and Bart, thank you again for that introduction. I'll echo you, Dan, on that. So while we are each agency owners and run agencies all day long, every day, working with community banks throughout the country, as we came together in this and the bank marketing show, Dan, we've had a lot of fun with this. Not only the guests, but the opportunities that we get to cover so many subjects.
Yeah, the show is a combination of Chris and I talking one-on-one about topics like this. So if you find this content useful, we'd love to have you as a subscriber over there. And we learn a lot of the topics from the work that we do day to day with community banks across the country, and try to share what we learn, share what we hear, and create a community. All right. So we're going to talk next about kind of what AI has already changed, right? What has happened since the launch of ChatGPT, which was only a couple years ago.
Yeah, and we get asked a lot, and I think that SEO is maybe one of the most relevant areas in marketing as we're talking about what the implications of AI have already been. As we know, we're now talking to systems, not putting keyword queries in. And we're having multi-turn dialogue and refinement of our messaging to have true conversations with the robots. And so a lot of what we're seeing is hybrid journeys, so that we might, in an LLM, ask a question, get a feel for information, and then hop over to Google, which still has 90% of the search market as of last week, and look for specific web links and those types of things. So we're seeing these multifaceted engagements happening. And what we recommend and do as agencies often for our clients, as we're working into AI and generated engine optimization, and what we need to do for that is having more human speak through our platforms, through our content, rearranging product and service pages to be answer first, not just a bullet point list of features. And the answer first being a humanization of how is this a pain point resolution? How is this the opportunity to fulfill a dream for a first time home buyer or whatever the case may be in that, and how it fits well. And then also having your bank positioned as a topic authority. So wherever you are strongest in certain industry verticals, as an example, having the content and the information on there so that you truly are an expert in what people are putting into queries and trying to have conversations about. And then offsite, 58% of query information for AI tools is coming from your website if it's specific around that and other websites, but a lot of it is coming from offsite. So where else are you showing up on LinkedIn and in other social channels and other websites that are coming back to you and referring to you as an authority in a particular sector? And the AI tools are seeing this. One great thing that we feel like you can do immediately and today is positioning and putting FAQs in on product and service pages on your website now. We like to encourage you to go to your frontline staff, talk to your tellers, and see how are humans asking questions and developing FAQs and content around that to be responsive to it and putting it on your own channels. Great ways to do that as things are evolving. SEO is not dead by any stretch of the imagination, but GEO is obviously a growing sector of where we need to have focus. And us seeing what has already happened in our jobs. We all remember back in the day, as in like a year or a year and a half ago, having to actually write blogs from scratch and editing and the whole process of what's going on there. And we can do that in a matter of minutes now, or at least get us a good bit of the way there. And Dan's going to cover some more about what that scenario looks like. Another great example is researching competitors. And we're not having to necessarily buy subscriptions to data platforms and all types of things. And we can do research around messaging and lots of stuff that, again, we're going to look at a little further here in this webinar today, and how we're able to present day capture that kind of information. So if a director is asking us for information on local competitors and how we put our hands on that, how tremendously that has changed already in our utilization of AI. And we honestly believe that marketers evolve, but marketers can also be at the forefront of banks in how we're utilizing AI and evolving not only our jobs, but the bank itself.
Right. So customers are finding you in different ways than they were a couple years ago. It's not just Google search anymore. It's still mostly Google search, like Chris said, but it's not just that. There's new ways to interact. There's new ways to do financial research. There's new ways to think about banking in general. At the same time, your job has been changing, right? Like you are using AI these days, which is starting to let you do more. And the expectations are building for you to being asked to do more. So I like this metaphor here of the boiling frog. I didn't want to actually put a poor frog in this picture, but the point is the temperature is rising, right? AI is different as a new technology because it's not just a new technology. It's an iterative new technology, meaning the advancements are getting faster and faster and faster. So the temperature is kind of climbing, and it's time now to start getting in front of it, using AI tools more, making sure you know what they're capable of, and know what they're still working on, and use that to the biggest extent you can for your particular situation. So with a couple hundred people on the webinar, it's we've got a range of sizes, a range of roles. But the big takeaway here is, this pot is getting hotter, and make sure you're using tools the way they're intended, right? A couple years ago, you wouldn't have even thought of ChatGPT being here, but here we are, right? And I bet your boss or your board has not come to you and said, "We want you to use more AI tools, use ChatGPT more." But that expectation is there because every conference, every webinar like this is talking about AI, and everybody's kind of, you all know everybody's seeing the advancements. And the trick is that it makes it so easy to do stuff, and then the LLMs like to pat you on the back as you use them and make you think it's a done deal and everything's done. But that's a trap that you need to avoid, and so we're going to talk a little about that here. So we're going to do a little mediocrity test. I spent like literally 90 seconds in Claude and asked it, come up with some community bank taglines, come up with some community bank logos. Literally 90 seconds, and this is almost verbatim what it came up with. These logos obviously need a little polish, but these taglines, like you would not be surprised to see any of these on a bank website. And I apologize if any of these are your actual tagline. I'm not meaning to call anybody out or make anybody feel bad, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is AI is the average, but the answers that AI give you are the average of the internet, right? Most banks, Chris and I together worked with over 100 banks. Most of them just have taglines like this that talk about, we've been around 100 years, we are a trusted partner, we have financial solutions for everybody. If you listen to the show, I like to say a lot that you put 100 bankers in a room and ask them to come up with a tagline, and 98 of them would say trusted and local. And so AI just gives us that kind of answer because it looks out at a bunch of bank websites. So, I like to do a kind of a mediocrity test in the work that I do and say if you could swap right a tagline with a logo and it still works, it's not differentiated enough. Right. We all see 10,000 plus ads every day, and probably 1,000 or 2,000 of them are bank ads. So if your taglines, fall in this kind of average zone, they're not going to stand out, right? And marketing has changed over the last few years, and especially with AI tools, that to really stand out, to really make a dent, it needs to be differentiated. It needs to speak to directly to your customers. So most people today, right, are going to AI and saying, "Write me a bank tagline." You're a bank marketer, write me a tagline, and that's the extent of the prompt. Or, and we'll talk in a little while too. Like, there's some more specific marketing tools coming out that'll help you get a little bit better. But the point is, there's an 80-20 rule here, that AI does a really great first draft, right? It gets you a lot further. I know in my own life, working with a lot of different banks at different stages in their journey, I have to jump and do context switching multiple times a day, and it helps me. Hey, help me get in the mindset of this project. Help me get in the mindset of this project, and it gets you a lot of the way there. But what it doesn't know, right? It knows a lot about what bank marketing is, but it does not know anything about your local community, about your customers and the problems that they're facing, right? It does not know what the first time home buyer in central, rural Illinois needs versus the first time home buyer in, New York City, right? They're all first time home buyers, but vastly different. And that first time home buyer blog has been written 1,000 times, but it doesn't know your specific local market. So your job as the human here is to add that emotional nuance, add that judgment, right? And think about AI as the first draft. It's the average of everybody else's work, and it's a great jumping off point, but you need to make it your own. And it's tough because AI will tell you that it's 100%. And my Claude loves to tell me, like, this is done, ship it. I'm like, no, this is terrible. Let's keep iterating on it. Here's what I haven't told you. Here's a brain dump of stuff. So I think if you've used ChatGPT and Claude a lot, you kind of know this. We wanted to break it down a little bit more. But this is kind of where we are today. Most people are kind of plugging stuff in and running with it, and it's it's creating kind of this proliferation of the average on the internet. So we want to talk a little about what you should be doing today, right? How does this impact how you should be using AI tools today? Because we do think there's a lot of good growth opportunities to differentiate using AI tools, but we want to make sure we're putting you in the headspace of using them the right way. So we take that 80-20%, the 80-20 split, right? And let's think about what that really means. right? AI is really good at doing all this stuff on the left, drafting copy, doing research, building content calendars. You go and say, "I'm be a bank social media manager," and write me 20 Facebook posts. They're going to sound pretty good, but I like to think of it as it's 80%. It's a B. It's a B grade. To get it to an A plus, your job is to know your customers deeply, know your differentiators, right? Like the first time homebuyer for your market, right? Know what your bank does that others don't, right? Or what you're really good at that might not be on your website, might not be on the internet, and AI is not going to know about it. You know your culture, right? You know your local market. You know the stuff that gets people to choose you over competitors. And your job, right, is to live in this space and teach it to AI as you're using it, right? So if you're using AI correctly, you should feel like you're spending a lot of time in this 20%, talking to frontline staff, looking at your reviews, engaging with customers, those types of things, really defining, documenting your differentiators, and using those as your driving force. Versus a couple years ago, when you might have been spending a lot of time actually creating the stuff, actually writing the blogs once you understood it. But now, AI doing this 80% lets you get even deeper in the green box here, which is what is going to make the AI output 100% yours and help you come out more differentiated from your competitors.
Well, because a lot of what AI does not know intuitively is how to best communicate with and actually have emotional or meaningful connectivity. That's what it's not going to give you, Dan, as you were alluding to. It's that it's speaking with what we think will just work for everyone. So, for that first time home buyer example, in southern Mississippi is very differently than in an urban area of Pittsburgh. And, saying get a HELOC and a rate notice is factual, but it's unappealing. It's just about the product. So it's us as the bank saying, hey, we're great, or here's our product. What it's not doing is putting the human first. I gave an example yesterday that my wife and I have actually been talking about wanting to renovate our kitchen and back porch. And so, in looking at what those possibilities are and how to do that, and it would be really great to have our local community bank in on that conversation. Is what I'm looking for and putting information in is about how to do that. I want tips for that. I want to do that without surprises, and some information on how to utilize a home equity loan. That's very different than bank speak, and specific speak. So that's really what we're talking about doing and being mindful of that. And Dan, I assert that it takes, that 20% to make sure that the way that we're finishing out our messaging, regardless of platform, right? Whether it's paid digital or social or SEO, whatever, or GEO, whatever platform that we're utilizing, we need to do that speak first, problem first, pain point first, and lead with that. And that's how these robots, I say, are communicating with humans and back and forth, and the way that they're going to do that well. So it's speaking to the job that needs to be done. Testimonials, scenarios. And Dan, on the podcast, we talk all the time about story. And Dan mentioned differentiators earlier. As community banks, differentiating is so crucial for us, and we can best do that through our story, through specialization and how we serve XYZ vertical or horizontal industries that are, that are real life. And we're talking about those customers' lives. That's what's really crucial in how to approach this best.
Yep. All right. So I wanted to show a live demo here. It's partially live. It's a video of a live interaction I had with Claude earlier, and I wanted to show you kind of, we showed those taglines earlier. We're talking here about, problem first messaging. So I wanted to show you how that could all come together in AI. And this is a little project that you all can do back at your banks. So let me shift my screen share here to this video. So like I said, this is a recording. It's sped up because but this took about 15 minutes end to end in real time to run. I'm running it. I edited it, the waiting parts down, and then we're going to play it at 2x. But I'll talk about it. But just know this is only about 15 minutes of interacting here. So what I wanted to do was try to come up with taglines that are differentiated from your competitors, right? So I'm going to have Claude here do a competitive analysis in a particular market, and we'll work our way back to taglines, and I'll show you our process for doing that. I'll talk about these prompts. They're all on the next slide, and then when you get when the video of this is sent out, you'll have them. But I'll give you a chance to kind of screenshot them next. So the way I'm starting here, right, I'm picking a community bank at random just to not single anybody out. If this bank that shows up here is somebody on the call, I apologize. I'm not meaning to, call you out directly, but I just sort of decided to have it pick a community bank at random. I'm in St. Louis. I kind of know the Illinois market pretty well. It picked Alliance Community Bank here. It's a $400 million bank outside of Springfield. And what I'm asking it to do now is act like a bank marketing strategist, right? But not say, do a competitive analysis or come up with a tagline, come up with a differentiated tagline. I'm breaking this down and saying for this bank in the city, and this is just part of the prompt. It's pulling the Alliance Community Bank from before. Look at their top 5 competitors. Look at a 15-mile radius. Find the name. Look up their size. Pull the current taglines from their website. Look at their strengths, differentiators, and make a table. And then what it does is pretty amazing. So this will run for a couple minutes in real life. But it pulls up it makes this big table here, and talks about where Alliance Community Bank lives, right? Again, I don't know them. I don't work with this bank, but what it's doing is just pulling. Hey, here are the big incumbents in the market. Here's a credit union that's threatening their space and growing quite a bit. It puts them all into this separate document here. That goes through all this stuff, pulls their taglines in, pulls the asset size, talks about its methodology, things like that. So that's a pretty cool first start of just understanding the competitive landscape. And this is stuff that if you were to do it on your own would take you hours. And again, this is sped up, and it ran it in 5 or 6 minutes. So next we're going to go deeper on the messaging, right? So my prompt here talks about okay, now go through each competitor's website. Let's look at a couple specific things, right? Don't just tell it to go to the website, but let's tell it kind of how to think like a bank marketer, right? Look at the hero pictures, the tagline, the target audience. What is their tone? How are they talking to their competitors? Is it really formal? Is it friendly? What are the calls to action? And then kind of add these to the table. And then per the matching game I shared earlier, I'm actually just asking it here flag taglines that are interchangeable with each other. We're kind of doing that mediocrity test as we go here. So again, it runs for 5 or 6 minutes, but it's flagging here taglines that are interchangeable, and some opportunities here for Alliance Community Bank. So you'll see it's added swappable distinctive flags to it. It's added a couple more columns to the table here. I know this is going by kind of quick, but it's analyzing the taglines here. So this bank's tagline says "Bank on Learning More," right? We don't know what that means. It's kind of pressuring that. So then kind of this third prompt, what we're doing is saying. Back that up a little bit. So instead of just saying come up with a tagline, right, we're again challenging it, and we're saying, okay, we don't just want a tagline. We want to say, what are all these banks not saying, right? This is a marketing strategy sort of approach here. What is the market position that none of them are occupying? What are some positioning gaps that the bank could own? What's special? What do you see out of your research that's special about Alliance Community Bank that other competitors are not talking about? All right, so it'll run here. It's going to check reviews, like Google reviews of the competitors. It's going to look back at their websites. It's going to make a little map here of what it is, and then it identified some positioning gaps here. It knows that Alliance Community Bank is a rural and ag bank. It's in the Springfield, Illinois metro, which is not a huge city, but a couple 100,000 people, and but it knows that Alliance Community Bank has a presence there, but is also in more rural areas where the bigger competitors have less of a presence. It's identifying that as a gap. The be the we actually know your name bank, the anti-consolidation bank, because some of their competitors just got acquired or merged. It's looking at a credit union with low reviews. The other interesting thing that's happening here, right? So you can see these gaps. It writes this report. As I mentioned before, I work a lot on marketing strategy with my clients, and I talk to my Claude a lot about stuff like that. And so it knows I didn't tell it anything in this chat about fractional CMO engagements, but it knows that from other conversations I've had. So as you're using it more, it starts to build this context of your uniqueness, right? And so if you're using it a lot to talk about that 20%, your bank's differentiators, it's going to pull that into the research you're doing. So I didn't ask it to do that. I didn't, but it knows. So I thought that was just an interesting takeaway. Right. So we're looking at these gaps here and now, right? We've done a pretty deep analysis. And what we can do here is I just ask it to, hey, you've learned a lot, suggest some taglines, right? So it's suggesting a couple different taglines for each of those gaps it analyzed. Now I'll say, none of these are ready to go, right? I would not take one of these verbatim and slap it on the bank's website. But if you look at some of these rooted here, banking from the heart of Menard County, small enough to know you, strong enough to back you, it's starting to get a lot more specific, right? If you think back to those really generic taglines, trusted financial solutions, your bank since 1873, these are starting to get a lot more specific and, starting to get you a lot, deeper and more towards a differentiated tagline in about 10 or 15 minutes. So I think it's pretty amazing. And the other thing I'll note is that I didn't tell it anything. I didn't volunteer anything specific about the bank, right? That 20% green box stuff, I didn't tell it any of that. It's doing all of this just from looking out on the internet. So there's a slew of information. I didn't want to call out any of my clients, but like if I'm working with Alliance Community Bank, if you're at your own bank, some of that stuff, right? And so if you can distill down some of that stuff, culture, the problems you're trying to solve, the customers you're trying to reach, and distill it down into your prompts and weave that into your prompts, it's going to know, and it can validate the gaps that you're seeing, and and give you a lot more direction. So I'm going to switch back here. These are the prompts. So if you want a screenshot, or this will be sent out, so you have the verbatim prompts that you can plug in. But like I said, make them your own. Add in that 20% of nuance. Keep iterating. The one thing we didn't have time for today is I could keep that chat going for hours, right? And keep diving in and keep asking it to go deeper on certain competitors or come up with different taglines in different directions. And this is where the real magic starts happening, when it learns a lot and has a lot of context to go off of, and then you can give it specific direction. So I just like to call out, like, this is something that Chris or my agencies might have done a couple years ago for several $1,000s, right? And we've done it here in 15 or 20 minutes. And obviously there's some we've done these, and we've directed the prompts that way, but happy to share some of this kind of process stuff. But just know that this is pretty accessible to all of you, and would be a nice little project for you to take on next week. So there's a lot of tools, right? I could make a slide like this. There are slides like this, with thousands of these logos on it. I just want to kind of break down, like, looking at just the bank marketing role. This doesn't even get into like all the bank specific tools, but anything you're doing, anything your marketing team is doing, there are specific tools that can help. So all that obviously was just done in Claude. Part of where this is going, and we'll talk about in a few minutes, is like, tools are getting more specific, and they will start to know some of the context. So like you could picture a competitive analysis tool that knows the flow and the structure of those prompts, right? And so you can just say, hey, I'm this bank, set up a competitive strategy for me, and it knows kind of what to ask and knows what prompts to do. So tools are getting more specialized. Anything that you're doing, there's a tool, and there's a lot of stuff, obviously, since ChatGPT was launched, like Canva, that on the surface isn't an AI tool, but it's becoming more and more AI driven as things go. So, I just like to show this to say, follow that 80/20 rule with any kind of, AI tool you're doing. You need to, you need to put your own special sauce in it because a lot of these tools can get you a long way, but they don't know your bank. There's thousands more companies I could put on here, but just know there's stuff in almost everything you can think of. So throw it back to you, Chris.
Yep. Thanks, Dan. I like that you iterated to everyone that our task today was to demonstrate just one small sample for you and didn't even put in a lot of information about audience or local culture or local industry or other things that the AI is not going to know. So what we did want to do for you, and we've been asked on the show and otherwise several times for the recipe, if you will. So that's what we're presenting to you here today. And I label it as a recipe on purpose because you don't want to leave something out of the recipe. When you do that, it doesn't taste the same. And so we wanted to strongly encourage you to go by this process and explain your role, your perspective, your persona, what it is that you're trying to achieve, and then the audience, who it is that you need to speak to. Is this something for your board of directors, or who is the audience that needs to receive this if it's a marketing campaign? And be as specific as you can as to who it needs to speak into, and be clear about what the goal is. Are you trying to create more conversions in a digital ad campaign? If so, it will give you something concise with CTAs on it. Or if it's more broad for brand building for a new market, it will iterate it in that shape, form, and fashion for you as well. And in sources and constraints, these things kind of go together. If you want to tell it what to look at, sometimes just as importantly, tell it what not to do, what not to use, and calling out, for example, a compliance, a piece like an FFIEC or something like that, and also tell it what not to do. And I think just about as importantly is once it puts all of that together, if this is a brief for a board, you want it to be concise, professional, polished. If it's something that's a social caption, you want it to be warm and inviting and conversational in tone. So as you explain these things in a prompt and take the time to do this, it will cut down on the reverberations and the iterations that and it's going to reduce your frustration and how you're needing to ask for things. So we gave the example here about writing a blog, but this is certainly true for any marketing application whatsoever, and a great formula to refer back to consistently. Yeah, and we wanted to give you some takeaways today, and some more to come in a few of the next few slides here. But considering, okay, well, I don't have time. I'm busy as a banker or a marketer, and have so many things to do. I don't have time to sit around and learn AI and how to utilize all the different tools that are available to me. Well, go for quick wins. Start small. Asking for summaries or rewriting content that you have that's already compliance approved, but you want to humanize it, for example. So, and where that's going, and again, cross-platform, digital, social, web, wherever those things are, so that they're going to be high impact for things that you're not having to spend a lot of time doing because you're prompting them correctly, as opposed to a lengthy process that is utilizing APIs to combine things for workflow systems. That's a higher effort. That's something that you have to plan and test and outline. Valuable, absolutely. High effort, yes. So is that where you start? Not necessarily. So consider those things for campaign briefs and things that can push the boat off the shore for you and be of good consequence. Not feeling like AI is actually bogging you down more than it is providing outcomes for you, and you're getting quick wins from that. So here we're going to cross over a little bit, and Bart, as you introduced us today, you mentioned the Kadince compliance AI tool that you guys have now. what we want to do is also encourage, whether it's about compliance or otherwise, you're not having to create things from scratch always. Dan, from your screen that you showed a minute ago, that there's so many tools out there now that are either AI based or they bake AI in to help you process things. So a checklist and running through initial drafts and what it is that you're trying to do and how your prompting is tailored to your product. So taking the time to build GPTs so that you're not having to be repetitive, as an example. And then asking for specific flags so that you're calling out criteria, whether it be UDAP or FFIEC or Reg Z or whatever the specific flags need to be as you're asking or utilizing AI tools in compliance. Because again, what we're trying to do here is speed up the approval process. So by the time I take my content and walk down the hall and figuratively hand it off to compliance, it has already been through a filtering system like Cadences or others, or parts of it that you're building on your own for specific use, so that the pass through has already been done. You're shortcutting your time, compliance's time, and you can also build in critical guardrails so that sensitive data is not going into AI models and all of that. And again, this isn't going to give you finalized, exam ready information like Cadences and some of the other tools that are out there will get you a lot further down. But depending on your utilization of this, it can save tremendous time and catch things that you wouldn't have caught before you hand it off to compliance, and saving everybody time and effort. Yeah, so where we're going with this, we've given you some background about what effect AI has already had, given you a demonstration, and talk some more about where we are. Now let's look going forward. Let's pull out the looking glass a bit and talk about how this is going to impact your bank, even your career, and how you can utilize it again to stay on the forefront of AI. So, our goal here is, I mentioned it, and Dan, from your demo, that was a great example of some things that can help you build a portfolio. You mentioned as part of that process that it knew the tone of what you were asking and your positioning, and you had not even put that in there. So by building a portfolio of prompt libraries, GPTs, ultimately agents, those types of things, part of what it's going to do is save you a tremendous amount of time going forward, but it also shifts time. Again, with this group of bank marketers that I was presenting workshops to earlier this week, they were coming up with ideas that as AI serves well, produces better outcomes than they might have, and saves time, what else could they be doing? They could be communicating campaign information to frontline staff so that when customers come in, frontline staff aren't staring at them blankly about some HELOC campaign that just went out. So they're able to do that and travel and be more community based and be more human in what it is that they're doing. And we think, guys, that is the capability of AI, is to free us up to do more and more of that. Unfortunately, it's not going to create nap time. It's going to free us up to do more and more things, just like when word processing first began to exist. Part of the insinuation there was, well, because we're doing that and so much of it is automatic, it's going to save us tons of time. People are going to lose jobs. No, things became different and they shifted. So as you're doing these things and being on the forefront for your bank of building these tools in a portfolio, a lot of what you're doing is positioning yourself as the person who makes AI work at your bank. I know we're kind of biased, guys, but Dan and I really think that marketing really is the forefront on a lot of thinking, practice, and implementation. And there's no better example of that than AI to help steer the ship about where you're going, get leadership from your buy-in, and even boost your own career. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does this all mean for your jobs, or the growth of your bank over the next couple years, right? We've talked a lot about what you should be doing today, but what should you be prepared for in the future? So, near term, I talked about this a little earlier. Like tools are getting more specialized at certain tasks, and we have Cadence that's getting really specialized at compliance. Lots of vertical specific stuff, just for banks, that's been coming online, or long-standing tools getting building in more AI tools. Right, the individual tools try to get you to use them over just trying to get Claude or ChatGPT to do its compliance stuff by knowing the domain, knowing the context. Right, this lowers the cost of using them. This lowers the skill barriers. Everybody's trying to push from that 80-20 rule to like 85-15 or 90-10, right? So we're going to see more of that over the next year. I think in the next 1 to 3 years, in the midterm, we will start to see tools go more from generative, like everything we're talking about today is generative. But tools are starting to become a little bit more autonomous. So picture a bot, an AI agent that can act on its own and actually take action. Right, this is already happening in a lot of domains. Banking is going to be a little slower just with compliance and regulations. It's harder to push the action of transferring money and all that stuff to a system that's making decisions without a human oversight. But it's coming. It's going to be a little slower in the banking market, right? Think in marketing. Think of a tool that instead of telling you how to optimize a campaign, it just does it. It just changes changes taglines, changes imagery, and tries to figure out what works best to get traffic or whatever your goals are. Right. I think we're starting to see tools like chatbots that can actually take application information. So instead of filling out an application or sitting down at with a branch manager to like open up an account, you can start to do a lot of that stuff earlier and send in your documents, send in your information, and it can automatically follow up with you to get the rest of the information that it needs, or ask questions before the humans get involved, right? So that's already started to happen, and we'll see more and more of that. The long-term 3+ years are where it gets really hard to predict, but also gets really interesting. I think we're going to start to see just the standard stuff, the status quo stuff we're all used to of click funnels, filling out a form, waiting for a call back, all that kind of stuff. The idea of applying for a loan or an account itself can start to break down, right? There's already some fintech starting up that if you were to go to Ramp and the type of like new types of fintechs, you're not really filling out an application in the same way that you would at a traditional bank. You're using Plaid or something like that to connect to your other accounts, and it's looking for your cash flow, and it's analyzing the account itself to make decisions. And ultimately, there's still today humans involved, but that's going to start to change. The whole kind of nature of banking changes, right? We're seeing bots go into online banking systems, but that could replace it, and you could see a future where customers are just going to only interact with bots to get their banking done and ask questions instead of downloading statements and that type of stuff. Obviously, like I said, all of it's slower in banking than other industries, but I still think I don't think all marketers are going to go away. I think you're going to be able to get a lot more done with the team you have. Big marketing teams at bigger banks will probably shrink over the next few years. I think, instead of thinking about, well, I'm managing, I have a team of a social media manager and, a digital ad specialist and those types of things. The team will be more of like AI conductors, right? You're managing all these different tools, but you'll still need a team to add that, human insight and the differentiated stuff. You just won't need, as much to do it. But the bottom line here is, how you work and how your customers bank with you, it's all gonna change. I just think it's a little further out than some of the scary headlines at the beginning would make us think, and no one's able to predict exactly how it's going to happen, especially not headline writers that want to get us to click on stuff. So I want to bring it back to reality a little bit here, and before we wrap up, talk about some things you can do in 15 minutes next week or today. Right. So here's some ideas from our talk today. Right. Ask AI about your bank. I would bet that the vast majority of you have never done this. It's a little scary to hit, type
Yeah,
this in and hit
I was going to
enter.
say, sit down before you do it, but do it. Yes.
Yeah, but see what AI says about you. Just ask it generally. What's the best checking account in my town? Or act like that first time home buyer, or whatever, farmer, whatever your product focus is, and ask it about it. See what it says. See what other banks it pulls up, and try to figure out kind of why. Do a mediocrity test, right? So take your tagline, or take an ad campaign you've got running, and run it through that test. Could you swap the logo and have it still work? Rewrite a page, right? Even if you're not going to actually relaunch the page, it's a really interesting exercise to just give Claude or ChatGPT like the URL of one of your web pages, especially like a product page that's usually pretty boring, and just a table of checking accounts, that type of thing. Feed it the 20% nuance, like give it a stream of consciousness brain dump of like what you really makes you passionate about your bank's products, and what you really think makes it feel different, and just see what it comes up with. You don't have to use it, but it just will kind of open your eyes if you haven't done this to see what's possible. Analyzing competitors, so take those prompts, that we did here, and do this for your bank, your market. Try to iterate after those prompts finish and go deep on one competitor, or keep working on the taglines and see how far you can get with it. And then a compliance test. So we talked about using it as your first draft, first compliance pass. Do that. If you've got a marketing collateral, something that needs to go to a compliance officer, run it through as long as it's not sensitive information, and just see what it flags, right? And then maybe there's easy stuff that you can kind of fix before you send it. And you should still send it to your compliance officer, but it will make that process easier, let you launch stuff, make it happier. And obviously there's going to be a Kadince demo here in a minute that will show you some of this stuff too. But a lot of stuff you can start doing right away. So bottom line, right? If you only remember, if you're just tuning in, now, as we're wrapping up and listening to this, like, the one thing I want you to take away is AI doesn't know your customers. You do. We are a long way off from AI really knowing your customers, right? It knows the internet average bank customer, but not your specific customers. So feed it your knowledge, and experiment, and that's your job going forward. So we'd love to connect with you guys. Subscribe to the show on YouTube. Our LinkedIn's and emails here are at the bottom. Feel free to reach out if you've got questions. If you want to, ask us how we approach certain problems that you're facing. Feel free to email us. We love to continue the conversation. We may have already done an episode on it on the show as well. So. Chris, I know you share this with me, but I want to thank everybody for sharing your lunch hour with us, I guess depending on your time zone. Thanks for Bart and everybody for having us. And yeah, feel free to reach out and continue the conversation.
All right.
Well, thank you guys. A handful of questions came in right at the end about where should I start? I was getting ready to ask you those questions, and you went right into those few slides, so you covered that beautifully. So thank you. Uh, Maybe just answer one question for me. On the more with the compliance side, what governance frameworks do you believe are necessary to ensure that AI-driven decisions remain auditable and are aligned with regulations, with our regulatory obligations?
Yeah, I was asked that by a group this morning. And so the question there, Bart, becomes is what we're ready to do and pushing the envelope with this going to outrun regulations? And are we going to be waiting on those regulations to catch up and keep up and all of that? Yes, very, very likely so. I think that's part of the case. And Dan, you may have some additional thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think today it's right. It's I think that the future is a little scarier, right? Today it's to me it's the simplest way to think about it is the 80/20 rule of we can use these tools. It's not replacing the human just yet, right? We need to review it. We need to make sure it's checking, nuance. Whatever it spits out, you need to challenge a little bit and say, well, okay, did you think about this? Did you think about this? Do we have the disclaimers in the right spot? Those types of things. So challenge it today. And I think tools like, Cadence will be getting, smarter as the technology improves too, and keep us from overrunning it.
And I think will even impact things like, running a first draft of creative, through a system like yours, Bart, so that it can shortcut the process of like, wait, that image wasn't going to fit anyway because we have to have DHL and FDIC and et cetera, et cetera. So redo it. And man, it just saves time all the way from creative all the way through to the compliance office. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Wonderful. Thank you. So we're gonna dive into that here in just a second. So thank you. So okay, everybody should be seeing my screen now for Chris Dan Wonderful. Thank you for being here. We encourage everybody to follow the podcast. This was recorded. We will send out the information as part of the email. I believe it'll become next Monday. To get your CE credit, the link was just posted here in the chat. Fill out that form, and our team will take care of getting that credit for you. If you're on this webinar, you're probably on our email list. You can also go to kadence.com/webinars. Here's a couple of our upcoming webinars, another one on April 30th and May 6th. We're just going to keep going, folks, from CRA to compliance to marketing to community engagement to complaint management. We're just going to keep doing these. They will continue to be free. They will continue to have CE credit, and we would love to have y'all join us.
Great to be with you, Bart. Thanks a lot, man.
Likewise. Thank you,
Thank,
gentlemen.
thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining.